Hey everyone, welcome to my session. I am so incredibly honored to be a speaker today as I am a big women in tech advocate, and I am so humbled to be asked to share my story with you all. For those of you who are joining, thank you for letting me share my knowledge, experience, and the opportunity to connect with you all. I am Stephanie Wong, a senior developer advocate at Google Cloud, and today I will be covering my journey into technology from no-code experience into the engineering organization. I'm going to explain all the lessons I've learned along the way and hope you can take some away with you today. So what DevRel is to the community, I represent the company, and to the company, Google, I represent the community of developers. And a TLDR is, a DA is someone who likely has some sort of coding experience, whether it's an official CS or computer science degree, or they went to school for a boot camp and they became a developer, or just somebody who has been a developer in the past life. And they're often the ones who build sample applications. They do live coding perhaps, or they give demonstrations of products and engage with the community on a technical level. I will say, however, I had a very different path and background into tech, so I'll explain how I got here in just a moment. In my team specifically, however, I feel like I got really lucky because I landed in this spot at Google Cloud that didn't exist before I joined the team. So as I said, DevRel is traditionally a lot of in-person events and presenting, but just as I was getting into Google Cloud as a sales engineer, video production in the developer relations space started to bubble up and get bigger. And so my role actually ended up being creating online content like podcasts, videos, blog posts that are technical in nature and still speak to the challenges that developers face. Ultimately, we're still achieving the same goal. It's to drive customer success by winning the hearts and minds of our developers through inspiring and educating them about Google Cloud. So podcasts are a part of that. Videos are a part of that. Code labs. I'm a speaker. I consider myself a technologist, a writer, a leader, and my mission is to actually blend storytelling and technology to create inspiring online developer content. So at Google, I've created over 300 videos, blogs, courses, tutorials, and podcasts that have helped developers learn fundamentals, solve their toughest challenges, and pass certifications all over the world. And this could be in the form of our largest conferences like Google Cloud Next. And some of here you can see I've been doing podcasting, speaking on stage, filming for different live events like DevFest, etc. And so it's been a really fun experience. So just to back it up a little bit, I do want to explain how I got to where I am today, hoping that this can provide you with some encouragement wherever you are in your journey, in your career. And what I want you to learn from my story is threefold. You don't need a computer science degree or deep coding experience to be considered technical or to be in the realm of engineering. The second point I'd like you to take away from this is that finding your passion isn't always the end game. I'll explain more what I mean in a minute. And the last one is that good luck is when hard work meets opportunity. Okay. So let's rewind a little bit. As I've said, I'm a developer advocate at Google, which is never where I'd expect to be. To say the least, I've had a very interesting path to where I am today. So let's back up. Growing up, I wanted to actually be a veterinarian or a forensic scientist. And it's safe to say that neither of those things happened. Even though I still love animals today, I really didn't want to be around crime scenes or deal with anything around dead bodies. So the forensic scientist thing never happened. But in college, the same thing happened where I couldn't really decide on my major. So I ended up going with communication studies. It was actually a very competitive major at UCLA, and I loved and was fairly decent at communicating. It was more on the theory side, learning about interpersonal communication, and I also had an interest in the entertainment industry. So like media, music, whatever, film on Netflix, etc. And so that was the reason why I ended up going into communications, because that was what a lot of people went into after they graduated. I also minored in something called digital humanities. because technology was still a really huge interest of mine. I enjoyed playing around with consumer technology, and there was a mystery and aura about the tech space that drew me to it. But I also didn't want to commit myself fully to computer science. So digital humanities was a great way to contextualize technology in the humanities space. So I actually ended up doing research on social media analytics, and I also studied augmented reality's impact on society. So what was great about digital humanities was that it connected technology to its impact on our communities and really brought in the world of literature, humanities, histories, and how we could digitize that space, make it more data-driven. So those were two worlds that I really felt were important as opposed to just strictly focusing on building software. I ended up doing a number of internships in both the entertainment space and technology. I did a YouTube channel internship where I was a production assistant. I did an internship at Warner Brother Records for music. And I also did an internship at Livefire, which is a community chat platform for blogs and websites. So that was a little bit more tech focused. Ultimately, senior year, I was still very undecided. So I ended up going to a bunch of career fairs, every single one throughout the year at UCLA. And all I did was put myself out there. I spoke to a bunch of companies like Venmo, Hulu. I tried to talk to Google, but they were only hiring for software engineers, which was not my background. So I didn't really think that that was a viable path, although Google was a dream company of mine back then too. So ultimately, I ended up seeing a bunch of companies and saw that Oracle, which is another big tech company, was offering positions in sales engineering and sales reps. I ended up applying because it seemed like a big, stable company to apply to. And unexpectedly, I was able to get my first offer as a sales engineer, which I had no idea what that meant. I didn't know anything about the tech industry whatsoever. And so it was a little bit of a leap of faith, but it was great because I knew that it would give me that strong foundation with a very, very well-known established name or a company. So I really just saw it as a launch point and a stepping stone. Okay, so finding my path after this. What was great about Oracle was that it provided me with in-depth training to learn about the tech space. So I learned about the full tech stack, how databases, platforms, and the application layers all interact with one another to provide an enterprise company the full technical landscape that they need to operate. So that was great training because I was surrounded by people who were also entry level, and I also was able to find mentors in that program as well. And after a year and a half, I realized that though analytics was an important space, I noticed that platform as a service and infrastructure as a service were the core cloud competencies that I needed to develop my next skill set. So I noticed that there was a lot of action around cloud computing, infrastructure as a service, and so I decided to position myself towards that direction. Ultimately, I ended up switching to a role that was called Customer Success Managers, which was new at Oracle at the time. They needed people to help onboard customers who had bought cloud products. They needed people to help implement those products into their environments. Somebody who would understand how to implement a database as a service offering for customers who are migrating from a database on-premise over to the cloud. And so that gave me great hands-on experience and put me in a position that made me even more marketable and competitive in the space. I noticed that there were signals happening where everybody was flurrying around, more of these cloud computing technologies. And so I saw it as a strategic move. It was funny because at the time, I was still trying to figure out whether I wanted to continue with higher education or keep doing sales engineering. And so I remember talking to my coworker, and we were basically trying to figure out what our passion was. And I struggled. I was having like a quarter life crisis at that point. Like, what is my passion? I couldn't figure out if it was communications, presenting, video work, was it technology, was it working with customers? There were so many roles I didn't even know existed at that point because I was only a few years out of school. And so I felt lost, and I felt like I needed to find that passion of mine to let it lead me. So it was challenging. But I did know that I enjoyed being around video content, and I thought maybe there's a way for me to merge those two passions, video and technology. But the thing is that there were no examples in the industry in technology at all, unless you're talking about broadcast news anchors that focus only on technology, which is in a path, but it seemed like it wasn't the easiest path to go down. So I decided to do what everybody else was doing at the time, which was try to apply to grad school. Because I thought, hey, why not just try to feel like I'm progressing, right? So I realized that I was doing it for the wrong reasons. Now I was at a crossroads. Should I do grad school or broadcast news? So I was applying to grad school, doing journalism as a potential graduate degree. And then while I was writing the personal statement, I realized, wow, I don't feel genuine when I'm writing this. I feel like I'm just doing it to get into a great school like Stanford. I'm doing it because other people on my Facebook timeline are applying to grad school and they look like they're moving forward in life. But it really wasn't because I was passionate about journalism, and I really didn't have any background in it either. And I already took the GRE at that point. I did a lot of standardized testing. It was a lot of work. But I still told myself to just follow my intuition, and I decided to drop out. It just didn't make sense. It didn't feel right. It was causing me anguish to try to force myself to do this. So dropped out of that. It was somewhat of a waste of time, but it provided me with the clarity that I needed. The clarity to tell myself that I don't need to do what everybody else is doing. Just trust that things will work out. Well, I didn't really learn that lesson at that moment, but it came to me later on. So at the time, I was already applying to Google a few times, trying to see what other options I had. And I even applied as a receptionist position because I wanted to get my foot in the door. And Google actually rejected me to all of those applications. So after a couple more years at Oracle, I was like, I'm just gonna take some time off and I will travel and take advantage of, my youth and be able to travel the world. And right when I was about to leave, Google actually reached out to me and asked if I wanted to apply as a sales rep position. And I was like, okay, I don't really want to be a sales rep. I actually enjoy consulting customers and being a sales engineer more. But I saw it as an opportunity to actually gain experience into their interview process, right? So I just went ahead and went through the entire interview process. I flew out to Austin. I did multiple rounds of interviews and I ended up getting the offer. Now I had to make the difficult decision of whether I wanted to take the offer as a sales rep and not do work that I loved just so that I could get my foot in the door at Google. So I actually ended up talking to a lot of people and decided that it wasn't the right position for me, because I knew that if I was going to go into it, it'd be great to be at Google, but I didn't want to pigeonhole myself or corner myself into a path that didn't make sense for me. It was a less technical position, so I was a little worried that it would be hard to get into an engineering style position. So I actually ended up turning down the offer, which was really hard because it was Google after all, the company that I had wanted to work at. So I just kept working at Oracle, thinking that I was going to continue with the travel plan. And next thing you know, a couple months later, Google actually reaches back out and says, hey, we actually have an opening for a sales engineer. Would you be interested? Because I let them know that I'd rather do that position at the previous cycle. And I was like, wow, this is great. This is the position I'm already doing and I have background in, and it's Google. And so I asked them, is it okay if I skip a few rounds of interviews since I did some for the previous role? And they said, yeah, let me check. I ended up being able to skip a handful of interviews and going straight into the technical interviews and the presentation interview. And so it was amazing because I didn't waste my time with the first set of interviews. I actually gained experience through that. I made a good impression. I still prepared a lot for it. I did my best. And it ended up actually working out. They used that to already vet me. They said that I was already past that point. So it was great. So the takeaway here is take the chance if it actually means experience for you, right? If it's something that you can devote some time to, you think it's going to make your name well known or it's going to give you some valuable experience, take the chance. Follow your intuition, of course. But if it gives you more experience, then absolutely it can be valuable. So I think the two things that I did in this situation were I followed my intuition by not taking the first position, but I still went through the interview process so I can gain experience. Ultimately, that still put me in a good position to get reached out to for the sales engineer interview. And I was able to pass that and make and actually get the position as a sales engineer, which was incredible to me because it was the hardest I ever worked for an interview for the technical round. I actually prepared so much. I leveraged my network. I talked to people who I knew already worked at Google so they could give me pointers and help me understand how Google operates and what their prioritization of product, portfolio, everything. And so I did, I did a good job at the interview and the presentation, and I was able to make it in. All right. So now I'm at Google, and the question is, how did I get from sales engineering into developer relations? So the first week I was at Google, I was completely overwhelmed. I had this newfound excitement for my sales engineering position, but I really felt imposter syndrome all over again, meaning that I felt like I didn't belong. I was like, everybody here is extremely technical, very bright, very well-spoken. How did I get here? And I still remember the first day walking into the office and meeting my team, I was completely intimidated. I was thrown into the deep end, and I just started having to learn all new set of products. Everything that's part of Google Cloud Platform, as you might understand, is hundreds of products and features. But I decided to harness that as motivation to continue to learn. I ended up just trying, instead of stifling myself by getting overwhelmed by the amount of information, I used it instead to ensure that I just threw myself into the deep end and started working with customers. So I ended up working with the team to present on big data, our compute products, machine learning, our platform as a service products, our security, all topics. And ultimately I was engrossed by this Google technology space, and I became certified. I went through a studying process so that I could be a Google Cloud Data Architect and a Google Cloud Data Engineer. And the cool thing about this whole experience was that it wasn't just me. I was able to collaborate with my teammates who were all around, similar in background, similar in years of experience as me. And so we all studied together. I taught other people, they taught me back, and they would actually give me feedback. If I was presenting to a customer, they would actually give me constructive feedback. And so the one thing that I'll say here is that don't do it alone. Don't be afraid of feedback and take constructive criticism. The other thing I'll say is, instead of trying to take on too much, take on certain concepts that you're trying to learn, whether it's machine learning or a new language, and try to teach it back to somebody else on your team. Try to teach it back to somebody you know in your network, because one of the best ways to learn is to consume information and then teach it to somebody else. So the question now is how I got into video and podcasting and make it into DevRel. In the first week that I was at Google, I actually met somebody who was doing videos on the side and asked if I was interested, because I told him that I absolutely love video work and technology. And so it kind of just seemed like a perfect alignment of stars, because there was somebody in my team, essentially my organization, who was doing something that I found was very, very exciting, and I was curious about it. So instead of thinking I could never make video work at Google happen, I thought, how can I make that happen? It didn't take too long, because in the first few weeks when I met that Googler, I jumped at the opportunity, and together we built up this new external YouTube channel for Google Cloud products. It was very scrappy, and we were using webcams, and we edited all the videos ourselves. And I still remembered bouncing from office to office, lounges and game rooms, trying to figure out where we could find quiet space to film. They were super fun. I was doing it outside of my typical day-to-day job, but I knew that it was something that made me happy, and maybe it could get, it could actually increase my exposure and my brand. So the videos ended up actually getting noticed. And after 6 months, one thing led to another, and I was given the opportunity to produce in a full professional studio. Developer relations, which is part of engineering, reached out to me and my colleague to start filming and doing it in a fully funded studio and posting it on the official Google Cloud channel. So that was super exciting. And then I was also given the opportunity from all of these videos to do more live events and host big conferences like Google Cloud Next. And so, of course, I said yes, because that was another amazing opportunity that involved video and technology. And so I just kept saying yes to these opportunities that felt right. They felt like it was like a snowball. Like things just started coming my way because I was getting more experience in that area, and people started to know me as the person who could do video and technical work. And so during that conversation, when I was interviewing people at Next, I ended up interviewing the developer relations director, who invited me to speak to a manager who was starting a team solely focused on video and online content for developers. And so one thing led to another, and that's how I made it eventually into developer relations. Someone gave me great advice to always take opportunities that scare and excite you, and this felt exactly that. And to be honest, I was scared so badly to go into DevRel, and I still didn't have traditional coding or developing experience back then. And I really didn't have a huge intention to go into a more technical department. But how could I say no to a brand new team that I was going to help build that also carved a niche for video creators about technology? And I knew that it would give me more opportunities to build my brand and thread storytelling, video, and technology together. And one thing I will say is that I didn't have the similar background to anyone in DevRel, and that was very intimidating. But ultimately, as I started to build my brand in the area and started to come out with my own content, people started to give me credibility in this space, and they saw that I had a very diverse skill set to offer. So a way to combat imposter syndrome is to know what you bring to the table and trust that it takes time. It takes at least a year to really gain experience in a new field. It's natural to feel like an imposter, but it will take a year at least for you to put out enough of your productive work for people to start noticing, for people to start giving you credibility, seeing you as a valuable asset. So just trust the process. So I know that was a very long video, but I want you to take a few lessons from my story. The first is to follow your intuition. Saying no to things is okay. Like I said no to an offer when it didn't feel right. And I said no to grad school when it didn't feel right. The second is don't stress about finding your passion. Trying to make a 5-year plan to find your passion is kind of a waste, at least in technology for me. Things change all the time. I led myself to a position that never existed before. It was a niche that later became my passion. And passion isn't always something that you find, but it's something that you can gain through increased effort in one area. So just trying your hardest and following your intuition. And also just keep in mind, like bringing your passions outside of technology into what you do with technology can help you stand out. For example, I discovered my strength in presenting about technology and distilling complex topics into a way that people can understand and feel really engaged. And that helped me stand out from everybody else and also find a niche that really worked for me. It gave me so many opportunities and it helped me really build a brand in that area. So just trust that you bring something to the table. And if you're passionate about arts, creativity, you're passionate about mathematics, whatever it is, bring that into your day-to-day work and let that lead you. Another one is that luck is when hard work meets opportunity. What I'll say about this is that I could easily say that I got to where I am because of luck, but I really do think that it's all these little bits and pieces along the way of hard work and saying yes to the right opportunities and saying no to things that didn't feel right that led me to more open doors. You are going to experience failure. You're not always going to get everything, but the way I see it is that when one door closes, it opens up 5 other doors for you to explore. And of course, be driven to learn. When imposter syndrome gets you, like it does for me all the time, and every time I switch teams, use that to inspire you to learn and take on bigger challenges. It might feel uncomfortable at first, but that discomfort will actually allow you to grow and allow you to develop your skills. So I'll talk a little bit more about some resources, but I do want to talk about my day-to-day. So as you can see, it changes every day for me. But a lot of what I do in DevRel and on my team are meetings, planning, presenting, lots of research, and constantly learning and then applying immediately. And in my role, it's all about how quickly I can consume, distill, write a story about it, a very engaging narrative, and apply that into a video script, podcast, or whatever. I have to consume a lot of information. And so often, like I say, the best way of learning is actually to teach others. And I found that when I was trying to get certified, for example, teaching others was what allowed me to learn the fastest. And then also just organizing your work and having a great work ethic is key. Work backwards from deadlines, don't procrastinate, and determine the point of diminishing returns. This is something that has really allowed me to execute quickly in my career. One thing on my team that we pride ourselves in is this idea of executional excellence. We know how to get the job done. We know how to do it right, and we know how to do it over and over and over again at a high volume. We embrace this idea of the first pancake principle. It's a way to encourage rapid and repeated failure for personal growth. So we all know that when you're making pancakes, the first one is always bad. The batter is either too thick or the griddle is too hot, etc. You have to make a pancake before you can see what you need to address to make the rest better. And no matter how many times you make pancakes, the first one is always bad, but it's part of the process. Each pancake you make lets you get better and better each time. Over time, your first pancakes are going to get progressively better. And as you know what signals to look for before throwing away the batter or throwing the batter on the griddle, that's the best way for you to continue to iterate. You can't get better unless you keep doing it. And so that's why we call it the first pancake principle. Our thought is that shipping out the most number of first pancakes will actually increase your quality of work. So basically, I would just say, don't try to get everything perfect. Understand your point of diminishing returns. And the anxiety is all at the start. Once you just keep getting in the mode of practicing and putting out stuff, that's your best way of actually increasing the amount of creativity you have, increasing the number of ways you can solve a problem, and getting better at executing your work. Next thing I want to cover is just how to find a mentor in the industry. Find a person who will challenge you and sit in a role that you admire, come prepared to a meeting, and bring value to the conversation. Find mentors that are knowledgeable in specific areas, and be sure that you are offering something in return. And a lot of people come to me and ask, well, how do I build long-lasting relationships? I feel like I'm just networking and asking people for coffee chats left and right, and it's not building anything of substance. So here's a strategy that could work when you're reaching out to people that you've never spoken to, that you'd like to get information from, you'd like to build a relationship with, or you'd like them to become a mentor for you. Well, it's something that I took from a workshop that I took recently called The Forum, and it's called Always On Approach to Building Long-Lasting Relationships. So it's basically about having a constant drumbeat of content or relationship building with others. You can spend 5 seconds liking and sharing a post to them or on LinkedIn. You can spend 2 minutes forwarding an insight with that person that you found interesting. Spend 10 minutes writing an email to someone, keeping communication channels always open between you and that person. Book a 15-minute virtual coffee chat, or spend an hour joining a virtual event so that people know who you are, and spend an hour writing an opinion post. The idea about this is that you want people to gravitate towards you. You want people to, when you reach out to them, they are able to see that you've already offered a lot of thought leadership in that space. You've already are known for creating content in that space. You're active on social media, etc. And that's why I think building a brand is so important. All right, my final tips for success are to surround yourself with incredible role models, know what you bring to the table, and bring your whole self to work. Follow your curiosity. Don't be afraid to try new technologies and roles. And then also just be very proud of your accomplishments and talk about it. I also want to say lift each other's work up, especially women. We need more women in technology. We are underrepresented, and without more women, we lack women in leadership positions who make decisions. They are the ones that make decisions that impact what technology touches in the world. It's not just simply about bringing in more diverse perspectives so that it can fuel a company's bottom line and innovation. I mean, yes, that's a byproduct of it. It's important to bring in diverse perspectives to make a better product and increase revenue. But I think that we need to lift each other's work up because it's just the right thing to do. Women deserve a seat at the table. We deserve a voice. And not just women, but people of color. So I really do think that when you see a woman's work that you're proud of, don't see it as competition. Really lift their work up, share their work on social media or in emails via internal channels, and collaborate with them. Just work with them to create a project together. So I hope that you took some lessons away from the story that I told, even though it was very long-winded. I appreciate you all for joining and hope that you took away some useful tips throughout this presentation. You can find me on social here at @StephR_Wong and on LinkedIn at StephR_Wong. You can check out some of my content on YouTube for more technical information about Google Cloud products. And I invite you all to reach out to me on these channels because I'm always open ears to connecting with you all. And if you want personal advice on any topic, please let me know. And reach out if you have questions. All right, thanks so much for joining today, and happy International Women's Day and Women's History Month.